parts of the community of Upperby and Currock score very badly on health indicators. Of course, it does vary amongst the population, but overall, the statistics would suggest that there is relatively poor health in the community as a whole.
There's sort of higher levels of child obesity, mental illness, substance misuse. There's sort of a real mixture of different things, really.
I see a great deal of people who are somewhat overweight, being honest about it, eating the wrong stuff, too much takeaway, and there's such a great, phenomenal variety of takeaways, which is generally unhealthy when you've got wonderful places to buy fresh fruit and veg and stuff like that.
When we had to write our business plan, we obviously had to refer to the last census that was done, and the health issues that came back. There was a lot of COPD, lung disorders. They were dying sooner than other people within Carlisle.
Some people are doing really well and are managing to stay healthy and look. Others, I find it much more difficult.
Well, I think overwhelmingly it's the link between poverty and ill health, and there's a whole range of factors such as the type of housing that people live in, the types of job that they have, the amount of stress that they're under. A lot of it is related to their finances, whether they have drug and alcohol problems, whether there are domestic violence issues. There's a whole range of factors, but primarily there is a direct causal link between poverty and ill health, and we see that reflected in parts of this community.
I'd say areas like this perhaps have less opportunity to perhaps access services. There's perhaps less facilities.
I would say this is an area of low income, and so obviously people don't have as much spending power.
Some people may well be able to go and join a gym and have the resources to do that. To others, it's just not a possibility. And that's why it's important in the work that happens in communities. So things that happen where people can come along and enjoy as a family free of charge are really important. They have to be funded somehow. But those funders are making a real difference in local communities like Currock and Upperby.
And we can see there's a difference in across Cumbria with sort of life expectancy, so you can have sort of like a 7-10 year difference between some areas, and fortunately this area falls in the one where people, there's a lower life expectancy.
It can also be about access to information if people don't know what's going on or the support that's available. So again, it's important that we actually make sure that when things are happening, people are aware of it and they can come along and join in. When you have activities in the park here, the people know they're going on and can come along and take the benefit of them.
It's something that we used to refer to as community development, which is really about empowering people to have some control over their lives and the decisions that get taken that affect their lives. And that's work that requires dedicated input to work with communities. And I used to sometimes refer to it as instilling self-confidence in people, because people may have had a bad experience at school. They may have left school with very few or even no qualifications. They may be in jobs which are not very satisfying and not very highly paid, and they often don't feel that they have any control over their lives. But I think, successful community development can reverse that, and it brings out the strengths in people and allows them to have some power and some say over the conditions and the way in which they live.
I think investment in certainly sort of more services and sort of groups like the one today, where people are able to sort of come together more, they know what's in their community, make those connections, have better access or easier access to services that they know that they at first are even entitled to get, and how do I get to it? So it's sort of removing those barriers, making things easier for people. and I think it's working in partnership, because I guess not one agency could do that.
We've simply got to educate people to live a healthier life, and the choice to be healthy is such a great one.
Throughout the pandemic, people have really felt that life has become much more difficult than it was previously, and now trying to find a way to come back together. Whenever you put an event on, you can just see by the smiles on people's faces how much they actually appreciate that. So good communication, bringing people together, making sure the services that will make a difference and the activities that will make a difference are there, and importantly finding out what they really value and what makes a difference to them.
I would say yes, there are parts here that do have strong social connections. So there are groups that do meet here that have known and lived here for many years, you know, have had their children here, and they've got those strong connections. But I also know, certainly from working on the emergency hub when we had COVID, there are people that live in this area that don't know anybody, and are quite isolated.
That's one thing I love about Carlisle, is that generally people are pretty damn good. They're nice people, and we are generally a friendly lot. In fact, super friendly.
We've got lots of organisations within the community that support each other, whether it is the parish hall, the community centre, the activities that go on within the park here. So you have people like Cumbria Wildlife Trust are keen to support what's going on. You've got the Model Engineering Society that has been here for decades and is a really valued part, and you see every Sunday when they're running that, the families that come out to actually enjoy that. So there are lots of things that support community, but there are still people who feel excluded.
The area in its own little pockets might have a strong community. For the elderly that live within this area, they all do tend to look after each other. Unfortunately, we don't get many of them actually engaging within the community centre itself. We decided to employ our own community engagement officer, who is now trying to get herself established within that community.
Community power is critically important. It's about making sure that people feel that they're being listened to and the things that they're asking for are put into action. And if we can find ways to devolve decision making to local community levels, that really makes people feel valued.
This feeling of powerlessness is one of the causes that directly links to ill health, and it is possible to address it, and to say that to people that you don't always have to accept these decisions.
Perhaps certain older generations as well, ones that I know who are accessing, say like NHS services, very much just accept the status quo. Oh, I can't have a cataract operation for, I don't know, 12 months, I'm just going to accept that. Well, no, that's not right. There are things you can do, perhaps challenge that or ask more questions, and it's around knowledge and confidence, I think, and empowering communities and people.
A lot of people don't know what they're looking for. For example, we run cycle rides from here. We give you a bike, or loan you a bike rather, for whatever it is, the time required. We'll even go past your house if you like and pick you up. But people who could benefit from riding a bike don't know they could benefit from riding a bike. So there's your problem.
I think it's really important that people are part of the decision making when it comes to improving their own health. I think that empowers them. I think it drives them to get out and actually do what they've been part of forming. It makes them accountable, so they actually turn up for it.
One of the real successes we had here is when we got the funding for the new play areas in Hammond's Pond. We worked with children, young people, families to find out what sort of things they really wanted. We didn't just decide or talk to a contractor and come up with the things that were cheapest or we thought were best. We talked to families and communities. Friends of Hammond's Pond played a really important role in that. All volunteers, community activists, But it means that we ended up with a play area that people wanted and they felt they'd been listened to. The cost of living is one of the biggest challenges that we've faced for a long, long time. It's becoming more and more difficult. Fuel costs with the lifting of the cap. People are finding their energy costs doubling and trebling, with the knowledge that it may happen again at the end of this year and then again next year. And it's a real worry as to how people are going to get through that. And that's why we would urge decision makers to come up with solutions that alleviate that pressure.
If somebody had said, even 2 or 3 years ago, that the price of heating and lighting your own home would increase by the amount that people are now experiencing, you wouldn't have believed them. And it's difficult to see where people on a fixed income are going to find that money, because if they're going to find extra for those bills, then something has to give elsewhere in their budget. And people use the phrase, are the pensioners going to pay for heating or eating? And it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but actually it's true. So I think it's going to get a lot worse over the rest of this year, and it's extremely worrying.
I think it's going to affect everybody, but certainly for residents living here, as there's more lower income families, there's more families on benefits here, and there's a higher proportion of rented housing. So I think it's going to have a huge impact on people. Just getting basic supplies, they haven't got a supermarket in walking distance here. You've still got to get the bus or get a taxi, so you've got to rely on local shops, and they always cost more because of the convenience. So I think, it's going to have a huge impact, and I think a lot of the groups that operate in this area will have already been seeing the impact, certainly from COVID, people struggling.
You might not buy that prescription. You might not buy those vitamins because that money is now being aligned for food, for your energy bills. You might buy poorer quality food because that's all you can afford. And all that unfortunately does have an impact on people's health and mental health as well.
Avoid the processed food, that'll save you money. Buy fresh. What can you go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
And the challenges that food banks and affordable food hubs are facing. We know that the demand on their service is increasing all of the time. So there has to be some real innovative thinking to alleviate those problems.
There aren't many shops, there's maybe only about 10 local shops. So I would look at employers as being the local authority, or perhaps Pirelli's, which is just across the bridge here. And from experience, I would have said all of those particular employers would offer good terms and conditions.
The public sector is quite a large employer in a place like Carlisle, and I'm very proud that the County Council pays the Living Wage Foundation real living wage. But of course, a lot of people are employed in the private sector. Some of them are very good employers and they pay, good wages and they look after their staff. Unfortunately, some of them are not, and it's certainly the case that Carlisle is a low wage economy compared to the rest of the country, with people employed on the absolute minimum living wage, which of course has an impact on them and their families.
I think for a lot of businesses it's really difficult, especially small businesses.
You've got manufacturers, you've got haulage companies, we all know of Stobart's. We've got the NHS is a major employer. You've got McVitie's, you've got Pirelli's, you've got Nestle's. We've got some big manufacturing companies who have an important role to play in making sure that their workforce are both paid well but also have a good healthy lifestyle.
It's a very tightly knit community. You get a lot of examples of extended families really, where people are brought up on a particular street, and it's quite a common pattern to have parents and then their children are living quite nearby and the grandparents are living quite nearby, and that makes for a strong community because they can help each other out. And you don't get that everywhere in some of the big cities with a much higher turnover of the population. So there are great strengths in this community, but the economy, I mean, this is a residential area. At one time probably the biggest employer would have been the railways, and we're actually standing quite close to the railway line that goes out to West Cumbria, but that has changed now, and a lot of people will be in part-time jobs. They may well have more than one job in order to make ends meet, and so it's quite a fragile economy, and with interest rates on the way up, it doesn't take much to tip people out of balance.
We're part of a big green spaces area, which is great for health and well-being. You know, if nothing else, we've learned that through COVID. So people can get out and about for a walk.
Through the pandemic, when people were facing times that were having to spend a lot of time at home, our green spaces became important to maintaining a healthy lifestyle.
I think it's fabulous that this area's got Hammond's Pond. I love the park. I think it's really good. You've got the Friends of Hammond's Pond, and you've also got the Model Railway Group, and they're sort of a group of, you know, local people that care about that park.
Friends of Hammond's Pond received a very generous donation from a local resident who really appreciated the park and all that it did for our local community. And she wanted something that would make a difference, and she came up with an idea of an art sculpture in the park that people would enjoy. Now the park is known for its swans, and every year we have cygnets that arrive and we watch them developing. So the thought was, wouldn't it be nice to have an art sculpture in the pond?
There's a really dominant male swan that rules the pond, so he's quite a character, I think. So I came up with this model, and they decided they'd like to go ahead with it, and I went ahead and made the sculptures that you can see behind you. They're made out of stainless steel, and it took probably 2 to 3 months to make them in my tiny workshop. So they've dominated my workshop for the last few months, and then they were acid pickled and then brought to site.
It's become a real talking point in the park. Friends of Hammond's Pond were absolutely fantastic in talking to local people and finding out what sort of artwork would work, and this is what came out of it. And it's another example of people being able to see what happens when people come together.
I love Carlisle because it's easy to get out of, which sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's so convenient for wherever I want to do, which is mountain biking, hiking, sailing with boat. I've only got a little dinghy. It's not like I've got a Gin Palace yacht. I've got a little dinghy on Ullswater. I can be there in 45 minutes. So it's a fantastic mecca for a retired outdoor guy like me.
I think there's good transport links with the buses, I guess, to get people to places.
If you've got families who haven't got the transport to get to those places, it becomes much more difficult, which is why we need to keep local green spaces in good condition and meeting the needs of local communities, and again listening to people as to what they would like from their green spaces.
There's some really great walks from this area around to other parts of Carlisle, but also to just get out on the countryside. So I think for here, there are lots of real good benefits.
It's not a good place to ride a bike, being honest about it, but especially if you're trying to negotiate what seem to be sort of cycleways, but really they're not. They're passing, shared paths, and it's not the easiest place to cycle in Carlisle. But we're changing that.
There's a lot of initiatives going on, but it's long term and it's often incremental. I mean, some of the decisions about some of our major employers are taken in boardrooms maybe hundreds if not thousands of miles away from here, So we're standing quite close to the Pirelli tyre factory, for example. The headquarters of that company is in Milan. We have food manufacturing companies in Carlisle. Probably the most famous one is McVitie's, which makes Cars water biscuits. That's now owned by a Turkish conglomerate. So these decisions are taken on financial grounds. There's no longer the kind of paternalistic boss who's rooted in their community. Money can move around, and so the concept of the branch economy is quite worrying for a place like Carlisle.
The older generation are still very strong-minded on supporting local shops. The younger generation, unfortunately, are probably more prone to online shopping.
Before the pandemic, a lot of trade was moving online, so it was becoming much more difficult to trade from physical shops, whether that was in the city centre or whether it was out in the communities. And that has extended even more during the pandemic, which is why you're seeing a lot of empty shops. But what it does do, it creates an opportunity for different things to happen in those spaces. Now, it could be arts and culture, it could be health facilities, it could be so many different opportunities. So not just becoming too fixated, yes, we have to support our local retailers, but also looking at local food opportunities, whether that is growing, getting those into the community. That reduces the travel miles of that food and the sustainability side of it.
I also think for those younger members maybe with cars, they're more likely to go to the little industrial estate which has the major chains like Asda, BM, which again doesn't help the particular local economy.
The local economy is under a lot of stress. There are some green shoots, but we need to make sure that that is maintained, because that ultimately is what creates jobs and employment.
If local money sticks in the locality, then clearly it circulates and it helps to build that community. One of the difficulties for large organisations, and the county council is one of them, is that the way in which public contracts are awarded is tightly regulated and can be subject to challenge from unsuccessful bidders. So I would say that I think most large organisations would like more of their money to be spent locally, but inevitably a proportion of it gets spent outside of the area. But the more that can be done to retain money within the local economy, the better that is.
Penrith cracked it. They call themselves the gateway to the North Lakes, and Carlisle has got to recognise that it's got phenomenal facilities, Hadrian's Wall, the castle, all the good things that we all know about, but it's also well connected to really, really lovely places such as Armathwaite. You've got a railway going east, west, south and north. The railways are, it's what a shame that the Keswick railway was dropped. You know, that would be such a good, I know it goes through Penrith, but it's all part of, yeah, there's a lot of connections to good activities.
A lot of the former council housing in this area was built in the 1930s before the Second World War, and of course, given its age and the specifications to which it was built, there are issues with it, and certainly there's been quite a lot of modernisation by firstly the local authorities and then the housing associations who've taken them over, but I think a lot of people are now living in houses that wouldn't really meet modern standards, and it's difficult to see what's going to happen. In some parts of the area there has been demolition and new houses built, but there's such a significant amount of them. I can't see that that's going to happen everywhere anytime soon.
There's a limited amount of housing that's low cost for first-time buyers. There's limited housing for people to start to rent, and you know, we've seen rent increases from private landlords, so I think it's something really difficult for You know, I've got 2 sons, and I think, how are they going to get on the housing ladder without having help from me? I think it's really difficult for young people.
We need our registered providers, the social landlords, to really invest in their properties. And again, it comes down to the financial environment as to whether they've got those finances. But actually having a good, healthy lifestyle totally depends on having good housing. And it needs to be affordable, whether it is to buy or whether it is to rent. If people are going to have good, affordable properties, they then need to be in a good condition and cared for by the landlords, and to make sure that we have communities that are able to interact together and that people feel happy in the places that they live, not just the places that they want to go to and travel throughout the area.
We have quite a large element of social housing, which is run by Riverside. I don't have any personal experience with that, but I do have tenants that have come in, and maybe things like they needed a gas fire updated or replaced, and they are being charged for some of those costs, which is, again, that's affecting health, because then there's a concern and a worry, because the people living in that social housing don't have the money to invest in fires and things like that. So I think that side of things could be improved.
One of the issues with private house building, and there is quite a lot of private house building in Carlisle at the moment, you sometimes think any available plot of land is having houses built on it. And of course, on the outskirts of this community, Carlisle City Council have plans over a period of time to build 10,000 new homes in a development called St Cuthbert's Garden Village, and these would be new properties. But my experience is that when developers are told to make available a percentage of those homes as affordable, then their definition of affordable isn't the same as my definition of affordable, and regrettably they are beyond the reach of a lot of the people who would love to live in some of those new houses.
There's so many terraced houses which basically don't have a garden, a garage or a place for kids to play, and I think that is really, really sad, and we've got to do something about that and give kids more facilities to play in. We've just done some great stuff at Hammond's Pond. We've got the council have just resurfaced the cycle track there, and that is now chock-a-block with kids enjoying themselves. Some very good groups, such as the Rock Youth Group, based up in Scalegate Road, doing a fantastic job keeping kids occupied and entertained, and actually learning as well and mixing with each other. We need to do more of that. And the housing in Carlisle doesn't lend itself very much for kids. It's not exactly, I've been so lucky in my life, had a garden, somewhere to park my bike. A shed for my bike was more important to me. I wouldn't want to put my bike in the kitchen.
I think we've got some great schools in Currock, Upperby area. To name 2, we've got Upperby and Bishop Goodwin. Both are good performing schools. So I think education-wise for the children, there shouldn't be any real problems there. I've
been a governor on 2 of the 4 schools in this area. The Upperby Primary School, I've been a governor for over 30 years, and there's no doubt that they do give a good education to the children around here. The secondary schools are, or they were until recently, located in the town centre, but following one of the flooding occasions in Carlisle, the Roman Catholic secondary school was relocated, and it's just on the edge of this area, and I was there recently, and it's doing really well. It's it's a fantastic new building. So I think people by and large do get a good education at the statutory school ages. Where we fall short, I think, is on providing people with the skills that they need to get the jobs that are available, or if they're already in work, to get a better job in by acquiring those skills, and I think there's a lot more work to be done there.
I think the area is sort of lucky because we've got a new secondary school with Newman, so that's a great, new sort of site for the area for young people to access. And we've got three good sort of local primary schools who all seem to have really good sense of community and community focus. So I think it's keeping those sort of networks with that community and those schools sort of working in partnership with other agencies will improve, the whole round education for children living in this area, but also supporting with their families.
We have the primary schools, which are fabulous when we go around and see the work that they're doing. Committed teachers who, throughout lockdown, did an incredible job to support young people. As the young people then go on to senior education, they have to go into the city centre for their education.
After school activities, I've got to be honest, we're doing it now with the community hub, providing children who don't know how to ride a bike at the age of 6, 8, 10 years old. I could ride a bike when I was 5. I just didn't get a bike until I was 7, But yeah, I mean, the stuff that kids can do in schools are a great resource of trusted, safe places to be for kids after school. They need that time to catch up with what they didn't get for the last 2 years as COVID. And also, I think the schools have got a fantastic control, if you like, link to the housing, to people, their parents, and involving parents in schools would also help.
To bring actually councils together is actually a good thing because it provides clarity. I do recognise that some people like the decision that's been made and others think that it's completely the wrong decision. But what we need to do is work with what we've got. The decision has been made. For this area, we will be part of the new Cumberland Council. The initial conversations that are taking place seem to be positive in terms of public health. A commitment is being given that public health will be a golden thread that runs through all decisions that are made by the councils. So what we need to look at that when Copeland, Allerdale and Carlisle are coming together, what can we take at the best from the 4 councils that actually cover those areas and maybe replicate them across into other areas. So let's pick the best and let's try and improve services for the local community.
From my personal experience so far, having met some of the members of that authority, it all seems to be moving in the right direction. They're definitely looking to make this authority people-led as opposed to officer-led. They want to hear from the people, they want to know what the people are looking for. And again, where we were referring to empowerment before, I think if the people have a choice in their own health, it's more likely to be successful. And I think at this point in time, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon with the health and well-being, so it can only be a positive move.
Well, I'm not a supporter of the solution that is being imposed on Cumbria by this government. I was in favour of bringing the 7 existing councils in Cumbria into a single council, which would have generated the largest amount of efficiencies. It would have saved between 20 and 30 million pounds a year by our calculation. The problem with the solution favoured by the government is that the big county council services are by and large going to be split into 2, and of course that doesn't save money, it's actually more expensive. And what that means is that the new councils will not only have to find the savings they would have had to find anyway, but they will have additional savings to find to pay for this new structure. So I'm very worried as to what the outcome of that will be, because some of the services which people depend on most are non-statutory services. We're standing in the grounds of a community centre which receives support from Carlisle City Council, but it's non-statutory support, and set against the pressures on the statutory services such as children's social care, adult social care, then I'm very concerned as to what's going to happen. But no decisions have been made yet, but they will be being made early next year, and I'll be watching that with interest.
I hope it will make things better. I think having 7 councils is always going to be difficult. There's a lot of bureaucracy. So I would hope that moving down to 2 would certainly cut that bureaucracy and enable the services for the 2 councils to work closer together and perhaps better than may have been done previously. So I'd hope with that there will be improvements that can be made.
It will be an unknown. It will take a number of years to bed in, but the important thing is that we keep good services running and we support our local communities.